What if your silence became your greatest weapon against chaos? When you stop reacting, you start reclaiming your power. This isn't about toxic people, it's about becoming untouchable through inner peace. Every time you react, they win. Every time you stay calm, they lose direction. You don't need to yell. You don't need to argue. You don't even need to cut them off, because toxic people don't feed on your presence. They feed on your reaction. The real power isn't in fighting back. It's in becoming so calm, so centered that no storm can reach you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been today." We're not talking about surviving toxic people. We're talking about becoming untouchable. Not by closing the door on them, but by closing the gate to your mind. Let's begin. Here's a hard truth most people avoid. Toxic people are not your biggest problem. Your reaction to them is you can leave your job, cut off that friend, move cities, or even go no contact with someone in your own family. But here's what no one tells you. You can't run from what you haven't mastered. You can change your environment 10 times, but if your emotional immune system is still weak, someone new will trigger you the same way. And that's exactly where most people stay stuck, thinking external change will fix an internal weakness. Epictetus said it best. It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. Toxic people only have as much power as you give them. Their real weapon isn't their voice, it's your reaction to their voice. They win not because they are stronger, but because you haven't yet trained yourself to be mentally stronger. A real-world example. Let's say you have a colleague, we'll call her Karen. Every meeting she takes subtle jabs at you. She makes comments like, "Well, some of us double-check the reports." You know it's about you. You feel it in your gut. Your chest tightens. You want to snap back. You want to prove something, but here's the shift. You don't. You breathe. You look her in the eye. Not with anger, but with stillness. You keep your voice level, your body relaxed. You continue speaking with clarity and focus. That's not weakness. That's mastery. That's emotional intelligence in action. That's stoicism. And what happens next? She escalates. She jabs harder. She starts raising her voice. Why? Because your calmness exposes her chaos. People like Karen don't want the truth. They want attention. And when you stop being reactive, you stop being her audience. Why this matters? Most people live like emotional puppets tied to the strings of anyone who knows how to push the right button. One sarcastic comment ruins their whole day. One toxic text triggers hours of overthinking. One manipulative guilt trip makes them doubt their self-worth. But the Stoics taught something radical. No one can control your mind unless you hand them the keys. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to defend your character. You don't need to win the argument. What you do need is discipline. Discipline to stay calm in the face of provocation. Discipline to choose peace over petty fights. Discipline to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. Take away. The smartest way to deal with toxic people isn't to fight them. It's to starve them of your attention, your emotions, your energy. They survive on your reactions. They thrive in your overthinking. They manipulate through your need for validation. Cut the supply. They vanish. Mental strength isn't loud, it's silent. It's the ability to stay still in a room full of noise. It's the ability to let someone's chaos pass through you without leaving a scratch. You don't need to change them. You just need to change how much access they have to you. And that begins with your response, or the lack of it. Because the moment you stop reacting, you stop leading power. And that's when you become dangerous in the best possible way. Let's get something clear. Toxic people are not powerful. They don't have some secret weapon. They're not strategic masterminds. They don't possess anything you don't, except one thing: practice. They've spent their entire lives perfecting the art of emotional manipulation. They've learned what tones create guilt, what silences provoke anxiety, what buttons trigger insecurity. They don't even need to think about it. It's instinctual. It's muscular memory. You're just reacting, not because you're weak, but because you're untrained. Emotional combat training. Think about it like this. If you walk into a boxing ring with a trained fighter, you're going to get hit a lot. Not because they're a monster, but because you never learned to block. You never learned to move. You never trained your reflexes. Same with toxic people. You're walking into an emotional battlefield without armor, without preparation, without strategy, and then blaming them for the bruises. But Stoics don't blame the opponent. They train for the battle. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." If someone's comment can ruin your mood, if a single message can derail your day, then the issue isn't them. It's your lack of emotional discipline. Real world moment. Ever notice how toxic people repeat the same behaviors again and again? You forgive them, they do it again. You explain yourself, they twist your words again. You show vulnerability, they use it against you again. It's not a coincidence, it's not miscommunication. It's a pattern, a program they've perfected. But you keep trying new strategies, arguing, explaining, avoiding, overthinking, because you're operating from a place of emotional chaos, not clarity, until one day you stop. You stop responding, you stop defending, you stop caring about being understood, and in that moment you shift from prey to presence. You stop playing their game, you start writing your own rules, training the mind like a warrior. Ask any high-performance athlete or military leader. Strength is trained, not inherited. And mental strength is no different. You don't build emotional immunity by reading quotes or watching motivational videos. You build it in the moment someone tries to provoke you and you stay calm. You build it every time you want to snap, but you breathe instead. You build it when you're disrespected and you choose stillness over reaction. That's self-mastery, that's emotional intelligence in its purest form. And make no mistake, this level of discipline isn't soft. It's terrifying to people who thrive on chaos, because when you stop playing along, they lose control. And when they lose control of you, they lose their sense of power. Take away the toxic person and your life is not powerful. They've just practiced their dysfunction longer than you've practiced your discipline. But once you decide to train to master your reactions, to sharpen your self-worth, to elevate your inner world above external drama, you become untouchable. You are not fragile. You are just untrained, and training begins today. Let's cut through the noise. Every emotional outburst is a crack in your discipline. Every time someone pulls a reaction out of you, rage, sadness, defensiveness, what they're really pulling is your power. You're not expressing your truth. You're abandoning your center. And you're handing the remote control of your emotions to someone who doesn't even respect your peace. Epictetus put it simply, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. The illusion of standing up for yourself. Let's address a myth. A lot of people believe that if you don't react, you're being weak. If you don't yell back, defend yourself, prove your point, you're being a doormat. Wrong. Reacting isn't strength. Reacting is a reflex. And reflexes come from conditioning, not conscious choice. The Stoic approach isn't passive, it's powerful. It's the decision to respond, not react. To choose logic over chaos, intention over impulse. That's what true mental strength looks like, and that's the mark of a high-performance mindset. Not getting dragged into every emotional brawl just to feel seen. Real-life example. Let's say your partner throws a passive-aggressive comment at you after a long day. Must be nice to only think about yourself. The old version of you snap back, raise your voice, prove your side, drag up old fights, hours gone. But the version of you, pause, ask yourself, what outcome do I want from this piece or proof? And then calmly say, let's talk when we're both ready to actually listen. No war, no just quiet strength. That's not silence, that's strategy, that's executive level emotional intelligence. Why we react: the ego trap. Here's what most people never realize: we don't react because they're right. We react because our ego is fragile. We feel insulted and we crave validation. We feel attacked and we scramble to defend. We feel misunderstood and we beg to be seen. But your peace cannot be dependent on external perception. If it is, you'll be emotionally bankrupt every time someone disapproves of you. Marcus Aurelius reminds us you always own the option of having no opinion. Read that again. You don't have to explain. You don't have to engage. You don't even have to care what they think. That is spiritual discipline. The takeaway: every time you react emotionally to a toxic person, You reinforce their illusion of control. You give them the reward. They crave chaos, but when you stay calm, not cold, not dismissive, just centered, you shift the dynamic. You stop playing the game, and once you stop playing, they lose. Emotional control isn't about suppression. It's about selection. You choose what deserves your energy. And most of what toxic people say doesn't. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, pause, breathe, master the moment. Because the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest, it's the one who chooses silence with intention. In a world addicted to noise, silence is mistaken for surrender. But if you truly understand power, real power, you'll know this. The strongest presence in any room is often the one who says the least. We've been conditioned to equate silence with defeat. If you don't clap back, you lost. If you don't explain yourself, they win. If you don't speak up, you're weak. But silence isn't passive. It's strategic. It's stoic. It's a conscious decision to not give your energy to chaos. The psychology of silence. Toxic people are addicted to reaction. They thrive on drama. They need your words, your explanations, your defenses, because it gives them a role to play. The victim, the martyr, the misunderstood genius. When you stop talking, you cut the script. And suddenly they don't know what to do. They scramble, they get louder, they lash out because your silence exposes their emptiness. Seneca once said, "He who does not know how to be silent does not know how to speak." In other words, until you've mastered restraint, your words mean nothing. Silence isn't weakness. It's emotional intelligence in motion. Real life power move. Imagine this. You're at a family dinner. Your uncle, the one who always jokes at your expense, says something like, "Still single." Maybe you're just too picky for your own good. Everyone laughs, all eyes on you. You feel the heat rise in your chest. The old you'd make a sarcastic jab back, maybe storm out, maybe explain your life choices for the 100th time. But this version of you sip your drink, you smile, not passive-aggressively, but peacefully, and you say nothing. You let the comment hang in the air where it belongs. You stay calm, you stay composed, and in doing so, you dominate the room without raising your voice. That's mental toughness. That's spiritual clarity. That's the energy of someone who's done playing small to please others while silence scares them. Here's what toxic people can't stand when their bait doesn't work: when you don't flinch, when you don't justify, when you don't react. Because now they're forced to sit with something they've avoided their entire lives, their own noise. Silence makes people confront themselves, and those who can't face who they are will always try to pull noise out of you. But you're not here to be noise. You're here to be clarity, stillness, discipline, power. Take away silence doesn't mean you're ignoring the issue. It means you're refusing to give it life. You don't have to clap back. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to meet them on their level because you're no longer on their level. Let fools argue. Let the undisciplined shout. Let the empty provoke. A wise man watches. A strong one waits. And you're not reacting because you're afraid. You're silent because you've trained for peace. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength. Here's the paradox. The calmer you become, the more chaotic they get. At first your silence confuses them, then it irritates them, and eventually it terrifies them. Why? Because toxic people don't fear confrontation. They fear it, and when you stop reacting, stop engaging, stop explaining, they start to realize something they never expected. They don't control you anymore. What happens when you go? Still, toxic people are like fire. They need oxygen to burn. Your anger is oxygen, your guilt is oxygen, your need to be understood is oxygen. But when you stop feeding the fire, it flickers, and in that flicker something unsettling happens. They feel the grip slipping, so they escalate. They say more cruel things. They twist the narrative harder. They reach into your past and drag it into the present. They insult what you love, what you've healed from, what you've tried to forget. It's not personal, it's tactical. They're losing ground, and they know it. That's why they panic. Because without your pain they have no control. Without your reaction they are nothing. Real life example. Think of someone who used to have emotional power over you. Maybe it was an ex, a parent, a friend. Every time they reached out, you spiraled, whether in anger, confusion, or guilt. But one day you don't respond. No explanation, no apology, no emotional open door, just silence. Suddenly they become anxious, they double text, they play the victim. They accuse you of changing or acting brand new. They're not checking in. They're checking your boundaries, testing if your peace is real or just temporary. This is where most people crack. They confuse chaos for connection. They think someone fighting for their attention means they still care. But Stoics don't mistake noise for love. They understand the storm gets louder when it's dying. The deeper psychological truth. Here's what's really happening. They're no longer dealing with the same version of you. They're trying to argue with your old self. The one who needed validation. The one who feared rejection. The one who over-explained everything just to keep the peace. But now they're facing stillness. And stillness reflects everything they've avoided in themselves. Insecurity, emptiness, weakness. Because when you no longer serve as their emotional punching bag, they're forced to face their own instability, and they hate it. Takeaway: toxic people aren't afraid of your words. They're afraid of your detachment. They're not shaken by your anger. They're shaken by your indifference. Because once you've built a mindset of peace, of resilience, of inner discipline, they can't reach you anymore. Let them shout, let them twist, let them burn out. Your only job is to stay calm, stay grounded, stay gone, because the moment you become unshakable, they panic, they scramble. They realize the game is over. And that's when you win. Not with revenge, but with silence. Toxic people are not performers by accident. They're performers by design. They craft drama like it's theater. They rehearse guilt trips like it's dialogue. They live for confrontation, for tension, for the scene. But here's the secret. No one tells you they can't perform without an audience. And the moment you stop clapping, watching, reacting, the curtain falls. The show only goes on if you're still in your seat. Let's say someone in your life always, where it finds a way to dominate the room. At family gatherings, they make backhanded comments. At work, they stir attention and then play the victim. They need chaos. They need noise. They need your attention, good or bad, because it validates their role. But what if you walked away mid-scene? What if you didn't bite the bait, didn't raise your voice, didn't take the bait? What happens next? They stutter, they stumble, they look for someone else, because their power was never in what they said. It was in how much of yourself you gave in return. A man who provokes you owns you, the Stoics would say. And the antidote isn't confrontation, it's absence. Emotional energy is a currency. Your attention is not neutral, it's currency. And toxic people are emotional thieves. They know how to provoke just enough to make you spend it on them. They don't want solutions. They don't want peace. They want a stage, and they want you to stay seated and engaged. But the moment you realize that not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life, you begin to curate your peace like a high-level executive manages their time. You stop explaining, you stop justifying, you stop dancing for their approval. And what's left? Stillness, clarity, control. Real-life example. You're texting with someone who constantly pushes your buttons. They go silent for days. Then message you something vague like, "Wow, didn't expect you to act like this." The old you. You send paragraphs. You try to clear things up. You spiral. The new you don't respond. Not out of spite, but out of principle. You know this is just a scene, and you're no longer playing a role in their play. That's not ghosting. That's emotional detachment with intention. And it's one of the most powerful things you'll ever master. Take away: toxic people crave validation through drama. They bait you with guilt. They manipulate with silence. They test you with passive aggression. But you're not a spectator anymore. You've left the theater. You've walked off the emotional stage. Let them perform for someone else, because your peace is not a prop. Your life is not their drama, and your mind is no longer their audience. In the Stoic world, power isn't loud. It's quiet refusal. It's the silent exit from a performance you never auditioned for. And when the curtain falls, you're already gone. Here's the truth. No one likes to admit you can block their number, delete their photos, move across the country. But if they still live inside your mind, they still win. Because it was never just about physical distance. It was always about emotional attachment. You don't cut a toxic person off by walking away. You cut them off by walking free inside yourself. The mind is the real battleground. You've probably heard this before. I haven't spoken to them in months, but I still can't stop thinking about what they said, or I blocked them. But part of me still wonders if I was the problem. That's not freedom, that's mental captivity. The truth. They don't need to be in your life to control you, they just need to rent space in your thoughts. And most people keep paying the rent. But Stoicism teaches something radical. Freedom is the absence of internal slavery, not just external conflict. Real life breakdown. You finally go no contact with someone who drained you emotionally for years. There's no more texting, no more arguments, no more fights. But then you start replaying every conversation. You question your choices. You feel guilt even when you were the one hurt. What's happening? You didn't cut the attachment. You cut the access but left the bond alive. You're still trying to win their imaginary approval. Still waiting for an apology that will never come. Still hoping they'll wake up and say you were right. But here's the hard truth. They already know. They just don't care. And once you accept that, truly accept it, you reclaim every inch of your emotional power. Letting go does not equal losing. People fear detachment because it feels like losing, like surrendering, like giving up. But Stoics don't let go to lose. They let go to win inwardly. Detachment isn't cold. It's clear. It's choosing not to chase. Closure from people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need one last conversation. You don't need one last explanation. You don't need them to admit anything. You need peace. You need self-worth that doesn't depend on external recognition. You need emotional discipline to say, I am no longer available for this cycle. Takeaway: cutting someone off is easy, but cutting off the mental replay, the rumination, the guilt, the imaginary what-ifs, that's where the real work begins. True detachment is when you no longer need their reaction to validate your peace, when they become just a chapter, not the entire book, when their name is met with indifference, not emotion. To be free is to no longer be haunted. And the moment you cut the invisible string, not with hate, not with revenge, but with clarity and self-respect, that's when you finally truly walk away. There's a reason toxic people hold power over you. It's not because they're smarter, not because they're stronger, and definitely not because they're right. It's because a part of you still craves their approval. You want them to recognize your effort, to validate your goodness, to admit they were wrong, to say you didn't deserve that. But here's the truth most people don't want to face. You don't need their approval. You need your own respect. The root of manipulation, emotional dependency. Toxic people don't manipulate you with facts. They manipulate you through your emotional need for validation. They sense your insecurities and aim right at them. They dangle their approval like a reward, then yank it away. When you don't conform, they use silence, sarcasm, and guilt as tools, not because they misunderstand you, but because they know exactly what keeps you hooked. And what keeps you hooked is the illusion that if you just try harder, they'll finally treat you right. But that illusion is not love, it's control. And as long as you keep seeking their validation, you're putting your self-worth on sale. Real life reflection: think back to the last time someone hurt you emotionally. You knew they crossed the line. You knew you didn't deserve it. But instead of walking away, you explained yourself. You pleaded. You waited for a maybe. Why? Because deep down you believed that if they approved of you again, you'd finally feel okay. But here's the Stoic reality. No one can give you it must be built, not borrowed. Their approval isn't peace. It's a drug, temporary, unreliable, and dangerously addictive. What self-respect actually looks like. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It's quiet. It's firm. It's walking away without making a scene. It's not replying to that manipulative message, not because you're bitter, but because you're clear. It's recognizing that you do not need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. And once you truly internalize that, everything changes. You stop seeking closure. You stop fighting to be seen. You stop lowering your standards just to keep a connection alive. You no longer trade your peace for someone else's comfort. The Stoic alternative to approval. The Stoics didn't beg for recognition. They didn't chase external praise. They anchored themselves to virtue, not validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Approval is unstable, it can be taken away, but self-respect is internal, unshakable, non-negotiable. That's what you build when you hold your boundary, even when it's lonely, when you choose silence over arguing, when you walk away with your dignity intact. And no one can take that from you. Take away, you don't need them to tell you you're enough. You need to believe it before they ever do, and especially if they never will. You don't need their attention. You need to stop giving them the power to decide how you feel. You don't need to prove your value to anyone who couldn't see it in the first place. You don't need their applause. You need to stop performing. Because when you finally choose self-respect over approval, you stop being controlled. You stop being manipulated. You stop bending yourself to fit a mold that was never made for you. And that's when something powerful happens. You become whole again. Not because they finally gave you what you needed, but because you gave it to yourself. You've been hurt, not just annoyed, not just frustrated. You've been deeply wounded by someone who knew exactly how to cut you and chose to do it anyway. Maybe it was a betrayal, maybe it was manipulation, maybe it was the slow erosion of your self-worth by someone who claimed to care. Whatever it was, you're carrying the scar. But here's the question that changes everything. What are you going to do with it? Pain is a tool if you learn to use it. Most people stay stuck in one of two loops. They suppress the pain and pretend it never happened, or they stay inside it, replaying it over and over again, waiting for closure that never comes. But Stoicism offers a third path. Transform it. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus or Aurelius. In other words, you don't avoid the pain. You face it, study it, learn from it, and then use it to sharpen yourself. The power of constructive rage. There is a type of rage that destroys and a type that rebuilds. When you channel your pain through anger, through bitterness, through revenge, it poisons you. But when you channel it through clarity, discipline, and direction, it becomes fuel. You don't scream back, you build in silence. You don't argue for validation. You validate yourself through results, through progress, through mastery. You take every ounce of rejection, every ounce of shame, every ounce of being overlooked, and you turn it into momentum. That's not denial, that's emotional alchemy. Real life example. You were in a relationship where your worth was constantly questioned. They made you feel like you had to earn love, that your best was never enough. You broke, you begged, you tried harder. Still they left you feeling empty. But now you train, you heal, you rise, you build a life so powerful, so peaceful, that they become a footnote in your story, not the headline. You stop living in reaction. You start living in rebirth. And no, it's not to prove them wrong. It's to prove to yourself that they never had the final say in who you become. Pain can refine or define you. Pain is inevitable. What it turns you into, that's your choice. Toxic people want your pain to define you. They want it to leave you stuck, doubting, small, unfinished. But when you use that pain as a fire to forge something deeper, more discipline, more clarity, more spiritual strength, you become something far more dangerous than angry, untouchable. I survived you, I grew from what you tried to break, and now I am someone you can no longer reach. That's real power takeaway. The pain they caused is not your shame, it's your source code. It's the evidence that you didn't quit. It's the beginning of your higher self. So don't hide from it, don't run from it, don't drown in it. Use it, turn it into strength. Turn it into standards, turn it into silence so loud you to success. Your best revenge was never a reaction, it was always your evolution. In the end, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing, nor come back. No emotional outburst, no need to explain, defend, or convince. Just calm/stillness, silence, because the moment you stop reacting, you stop giving away the one thing. Toxic people truly feed on control. Power isn't loud, it's still. Most people think power looks like dominance, the louder voice, the sharper words, the stronger reaction. But real power, Stoic power, doesn't shout, it watches, it waits, it refuses to be moved. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, no one can shake you unless you agree to be shaken. And when you truly understand that, you become unreachable. Real life mastery. You get a text full of blame and manipulation. The old you'd start typing paragraphs, you'd cry, you'd defend. But now you read it, you recognize the trap. You don't respond. Not out of spite, but because you've outgrown the level where that conversation exists. That's not avoidance. That's non-reaction as conscious mastery. And that right there is your turning point. Non-reaction is not weakness, it's spiritual strength. Let's be clear, non-reaction doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you're disciplined. You've trained your nervous system. You've studied your triggers. You've rebuilt your identity, not to suppress emotion, but to refuse enslavement to it. It's the kind of mental discipline that turns chaos into clarity. The kind of spiritual resilience that says, I don't need to win, I just need to stay free. The final lesson, toxic people don't disappear because you fight them. They disappear when they realize they can't reach you anymore. And that moment doesn't come from revenge, anger, or proving your point. It comes from the quietest shift of all non-reaction. The choice to not answer the insult. The decision to stay silent in the storm. The refusal to make your inner peace negotiable. Because when you stop reacting, you stop bleeding power. You stop playing their game. You stop being controlled. And that is when you become dangerous in the best way. You rise, you thrive, you stay calm, and they fade into background noise. Because the smartest way to deal with toxic people was never to beat them. It was to become someone they could no longer touch. So now you know the smartest way to deal with toxic people is not revenge, not arguments, not proving your worth to someone who never valued it in the first place. It's becoming untouchable, not because you blocked them, not because you burned a bridge, but because you built a fortress within yourself that no one can break through. You didn't destroy them, you didn't even need to. You simply chose not to let them live inside your head rentry. And in doing so, you became something rare, something unshakable, someone who no longer reacts because you finally remembered who you are. Let them perform, let them twist the narrative, let them scream into the void. You're gone mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and in that absence, they lose all power. The fire dies when you stop feeding it. If this message resonated with you, if you felt seen, empowered, or even challenged, then this is just the beginning of your inner transformation. Leave a comment and tell us what's one toxic situation you're finally ready to stop reacting to. Let your healing inspire someone else. Subscribe to Think Stoic 101 for weekly guidance on building the strongest version of yourself from the inside out. And turn on the notification bell because peace isn't just a mood, it's a mindset, and every week we sharpen it together. Remember, you don't win by reacting. You win by rising. In conclusion, your strength lies not in fighting chaos, but in becoming immune to it. Through the teachings of Stoic philosophy, we've explored how detachment, discipline, and clarity can transform your life. You don't need to prove your worth, react to provocation, or beg for understanding. Your true power is in non-reaction, in becoming someone so centered that no storm can shake you. Let toxic people scream into the void. You've outgrown the stage, and in your stillness you've already won.